All right. I think we are online. The attendees are starting to flow in. So we're going to give maybe 20, 30 seconds to allow everybody to get in and make sure their audio is working and those sorts of things. And then we'll get going. Awesome. So I think we'll get started now. Thanks everyone for taking some time out of their day to check out Iconik and our remote editing collaboration webinar here. I'm Mike Zemlinski. I handle North America for Iconik, and I am based out of Detroit. And as you guys can probably tell from the video, I'm sitting in my kitchen right now. There's glasses over the shoulder. There's some dogs laying in the corner over there. We're all kind of working from home here. Also on the call, we've got Tim Child. Tim?
Hi. Yeah, I'm a Chief Experience Officer at Iconik. I deal mainly with the user experience, developer experience, and anything around workflows for Iconik.
Yep, and Tim is actually in Stockholm right now. So we are about 6,000 miles apart from each other. So what I'm going to actually do first here, because we're going to talk about remote editing, is I'm going to actually start to ingest some content. So you guys can see my screen right now. You can see my camera. I've got this little Fusion drive here that I'm holding up. It's a little SSD that's connected to my laptop. And I've got a storage gateway running here as well. And I'm going to just copy some media. It's about 60 gigs worth of content onto a storage gateway that's running on my laptop. And we can see this thing's pretty quick. It's going at about 850 megabytes a second, but you can see about how much space we got going on here. And while that's copying over, we will start to talk a little bit about Iconik. So for those of you that are not aware of what Iconik is, it is a cloud software as a service platform. It is a media collaboration hub, and it is actually a development platform as well, in the sense that we have completely open APIs. The system itself is built off of Kubernetes and microservices. It is a true web scale application built from the ground up for the cloud. So we are not just running our traditional on-premise software in the cloud and calling it a cloud service. We have built this from the ground up. And the Iconik system in general has a lot of pluggability. And the great benefit here is that when we're talking about high-res media and very large files, the high-resolution content can live wherever it makes sense for it to live. The brains live in the cloud, and the proxies live in the cloud. So we can watch on-premise storage. So you'll notice in the upper left there, we have this thing called the Iconik Storage Gateway, which I'll get into in a little bit here. And that can watch on-premise storage. And then we can see on the right side there, we've got AWS S3, we've got Backblaze B2, we've got GCS, and we do support Azure Blob through MinIO gateways as well. So we support all the major cloud providers as well for storage, as well as a lot of other cloud services. So AI recognition, IDP, login management, and then some various cloud providers for Transcode as well. And the system was built a little over 3.5 years ago when development started, and we've been shipping for about 2 years now. And this is a completely separate team from our Cantamo Portal team. The product is a completely separate product. We've started this with the vision of what we think media management can be into the future, and that is kind of a global collaboration hub, allowing people to work together regardless of their geographic distance. So with that said, what is the storage gateway? So part of the problem of having a pure cloud solution for media and entertainment and video production is that files are really big. So the Iconik Storage Gateway is a piece of software that actually runs on-premise wherever that high-res footage might live on file systems. So if you have a SAN or a NAS system, or you have local attached storage to an edit suite or what have you, the idea is that we can actually index all of that content, and we can make sure that proxies are generated, and then those proxies are actually checked into the cloud. And from there, we have this ability to start collaborating on them across much larger geographies than we can if we're just allowing VPN access into the facility to look at high res, or having to copy files physically from location to location to get to them. So what we're going to talk about a little bit today is essentially making moving projects around from workstation to workstation. So starting a project in one place and moving it to another. Having editorial happen in a remote location where the storage may not actually physically be. So Tim's in Stockholm, I'm in Detroit, and the high resolution media lives here, but Tim will actually be doing all of the actual media editing from Stockholm, and I'll do the conform here. And then we can actually share projects without some files. So we'll show that workflow as well. Tim's he has some creative content that he's adding in Stockholm to our little project that we're gonna put together here. So with that said, we're gonna actually dive into Iconik here and show you what's going on. So we have a variety of content that we just copied over into the system. And I'm realizing now that I didn't do this beforehand. So that content is going to be brought into the system by our storage gateway itself, and our storage gateway actually ran in the background, picked up all of those items. Unfortunately, because I did a practice session beforehand and I deleted all that content, it's still in here. So I'm going to actually restore this stuff and delete the stuff we don't need. Sorry about that, guys. I'm actually literally deleting files right now. Boom, all the way gone. So we've got content that's been brought into the system from my local storage. And if we go take a look at any of this content, there's a proxy generated for that content, but we can see that the original high res is actually living on my laptop itself in these cases. So that original high res, which is a 22 gigabyte file, does not live in the cloud whatsoever. It only lives local to me here in Detroit. And the low res actually does live in the cloud. So that's how I'm able to browse through it. You can see we've got some metadata that is associated with that content as well. So I can really quickly just search for the term webinar. And because I threw that content into a directory that is named webinar on my file system, it automatically tagged it all with that, that content. And then I can take all of that and I can actually associate it with a specific project. So I can go and create a project here, and I'll call this webinar edit demo. And I'll find all that stuff, webinar. So here's all of my content, and I can actually throw that into my webinar edit demo collection. And what collections are just virtual folder structures. So we can actually, with the items being in there, we can organize things that live on different storages in one organizational tree. So you can use them for projects, you could use them for just browsability within the system. If I hop into that now, I can see all that content available and visible to me. And then I can hop in, and if I want to, start to make some notes about this specific item. So here, I've actually made a comment that says, this is where the motion starts for this particular clip. And as I scrub through, you can see that that's got an in and an out point. So I think that'll be good for Tim to use. I can go back up a little bit here and maybe take a look at this clip right here, which is a cool zoom out, and say, you know what, I think we should probably start right about there with an in point and then rotate around with an out point, and maybe we should speed ramp this. And I can put some color coding behind that and submit that. And now there's a tagged color code time-based comment on that Tim's going to be able to see in his world on the Premiere side of things. So now that we've got all of that content ingested into the system. All the proxies are generated. And obviously those proxies generated and uploaded significantly faster than it would have taken me to upload 60 gigabytes of actual data to the cloud. I can hand that over to Tim in Stockholm, and he can start working with that content inside of his project. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let Tim share his screen.
Great, thanks, Mike. So basically what I'm going to start with is I've also got a couple of files that I want to use in this project. One's an audio file, one's a very short movie, just a logo. So I'm just going to find the collection that was just created here. So webinar edit demo. And I'm just going to drag those clips over and add some metadata for webinar. There's a date that needs to be added. It's a required field, so I'm going to add that quickly. And then I'm going to set that to upload. So while that's doing that, I'll just minimize the browser and get rid of that. And what I have open here right now is Adobe Premiere Pro, and I'm going to be doing my project in that at the moment. So I've got this project open. I have created a sequence already. So looking at this, it's what the final delivery will be. So 2997 frames a second, and it's going to be 4K. But what I'm not going to be working with is the actual 4K media itself. I'm going to be working mostly with the proxies. So up here, we've got the Adobe Premiere panel for Iconik. And basically, this is the full Iconik kind of web interface, but cut down and embedded in the Adobe application. And it offers me a lot of the same functionality. So I can go in, I can browse, I can play back the video, I can open comments to see what's going on here, browse to the next, and so forth. So this gives me a good idea of what media is in the actual system itself. So then I can pick the correct stuff. And I can do searches and filters on the searches and so forth. But importantly, I can also go to the collections and then browse to the collection that was just created, and then go and see the media that's up there. Now you see the two files here, those are the ones I just added. So I'm actually going to use those from Iconik, so it maintains the references to Iconik. And I'm going to bring in just the originals of those. And that's going to download them from the cloud onto my local machine for use. So there they are now. But for the rest of these, I'm going to open Proxies. And this will mean that, yes, it's downloading, but the file size is significantly reduced. It's not the same 60 gigabytes of content that was needed before. As you can see, they've opened up really, really quickly. So now I can start my edit. So I'm going to start off by adding the audio, and I will zoom into that a little bit. You can see some markers on here. These are actually markers that I created in the file before I uploaded it, and they've been maintained since bringing them in from Iconik. So those serve as my edit markers for what's going to go on here. And the next one I want to bring in is this clip. Now, we can see the video here, but more importantly, we can also see the markers and tags that Mike was doing earlier. And there's a better view here. So we can see this is where the motion starts. So he gives me a good idea of where I'm going to create my edit points. So I think I'm going to basically create an in point around here and an out point around there, and just drag the video down really quickly, and maybe make it a little bit longer, because what I also want to do is go back to the project and take that logo that I uploaded and stick that over the top. Now this is basically going to give me a view of what's going on. So I can then reduce the size of that because it was a little bit large, and I'm going to have a dissolve happening. So it fades in and out, and I'll just make that a little bit bigger so it's easier to work with, and just create dissolve a little bit longer. So there we go. And we can see that that's then playing to my audio. So we can move on to the next clip. And again, Mike has created a nice marker here. So I'm going to basically set that to the in point and set the out point there, and then add that. So let's zoom out a little bit. And he said that maybe we should ramp this. That's a really good suggestion. So what I'm going to do is go down here to time remapping, speed, bring the playhead back so I can put in a small keyframe. And then I'm going to significantly speed this up. And as you can see, it's reducing the size of that a little bit. Now, I'm going to then ramp this over. So basically, yeah, we can have it a little bit shorter. At this point, I think I'm going to actually remove some of this effects track that's gone on here because it's gone over my audio. So let's drag that back over and let's just take in the video this time. So still long, do the time remapping, the speed, and let's add a keyframe. And now we can see against the markers where it should be. So I think I'm going to go a little bit beyond, and then I'm going to have a ramp up. And maybe a little bit longer, so it just matches that marker there. And then we can see it speed up as it comes in. So hopefully that will suit what he wanted. Going on to the next clip. Let's open that one up. And here we have a nice shot. Mike's already created another in point and out point for me. So let's see how that matches up onto the sequence I'm creating. I'm just going to do that and drag that down again. It's just about, yeah, just about there. So I think I'm happy with that. Yep, that's kind of how I want the edits to be at that point. And let's move on to that clip here. Now I've looked at this earlier when Mike was actually ingesting stuff and talking. So I really like the fact that there was this drone taking off at this point in time. So I'm going to mark an in point and mark an out point. Now it's about here. Again, let's drag some of the video down. It's a little bit long. Just pull it down like that. And then finally, there was a shot, this one, with the guys waving. So this is where they all wave at us. So that's probably something that's good to use as an outro. So maybe an in point there, an out point there, and video over, and drag that down. So we've got the guys waving. And then lastly, what I want to use is this logo animation. So this is basically got some audio, and I think Mike marked that. Yeah, I don't think we need the audio, but we should trail with this. So I'm going to take that whole thing and put it at the end there, and then reduce the length of the audio just to match up. So that looks okay, but it doesn't really work for me. Yeah, there's too much black there. So what I'll do is I'm just going to stick a dissolve over that. So then, yeah, so we get a bit of a fade. So I'm kind of happy with how that's worked out. I'm going to quickly send that over to Mike. So to do that, what I need to do is switch back to the Iconik panel. Then I'm going to select the Projects tab. I'm going to save the project, and I'm actually going to upload the project because maybe I got it right the first time. You never know. It sometimes happens. But what I also want to do is we've got a list of sequences here. I'm going to upload that to Iconik as well. And this will then open up a ability to then send this over to the Iconik system in the background. So just to show you that again, upload to Iconik, and then we get this list of render presets that I could use here. These are render presets in Adobe Media Encoder, because what's going to happen is when I click that, the panel will send it to Adobe Media Encoder, and Adobe Media Encoder will render the file out. And when that file is closed and finished, the Iconik panel will upload that. While it's doing that, I'm just going to check over here at the project files. This gives me a list of all the files that were used in the project, and it can tell me, are they in Iconik or not? Well, we saw earlier that they were all coming from Iconik, so they all are there. So basically, I don't need to use this functionality to upload all non-Iconik project items. They're all there. Some are proxies, some are the originals, but he would be able to then work with that. Now that's uploaded, I've now got the ability to go and view the Iconik asset. So I'm going to do that from within the panel. And it's transcoding right now in the cloud. So this will give Mike the ability to preview it. I could have rendered out a master clip at the same time. So I could have done like a ProRes or whatever. It was quite a large file. This always gives the ability to be able to view this no matter what file type is used. What I want to do is to request approval from Mike. So I'll bring this window up, and within here I can select users, and they're either internal to the system, so these are the other guys that have got user accounts in Iconik, or I could type in email addresses here, and that would then send a unique link to each user that you type in there to basically go and review it. So I'm going to say, please review this. What do you think about the cuts? And send that. And that's basically going to fire off a message to Mike, and it's also set awaiting review on the actual asset itself. So now I think what I'll do is stop the share and hand back to Mike.
Great, thanks, Tim. So back in Detroit, I will share my screen. And you'll notice I haven't really left my Iconik view from the last time you guys saw my screen, but I did get a notification up here. And that notification has said, hey, you've requested a review of that. So I can click on that and I'll be able to watch his edit now. So I'm going to take a look at it. Oh, well, I noticed something right there. You guys see that? That's the drone pilot. So we're going to frame advance up to the first part of that cut. I'm going to mark it in, and I'm going to find a good out point there where he's not in it anymore and say, hey, can you slip out the pilot? Make a note there. So we've got that. Keep watching. And maybe here, I'm going to mark it in and roll out and say, should we use the shot with the dog? I'm not sure. I'm asking for some feedback, and I'll color code that a little bit differently. Take a look at the rest of it. Okay, cool. And I'm going to reject this because obviously we've made a couple of notes and comments on that. I want to make sure that Tim's aware that I've made some comments on it. So at this point, I can actually pass the screen share back to him in Stockholm.
Thanks, Mike. So I've got the panel open. I can see there's my drone edit there. I'm just going to go straight into it, and it's being rejected. And I can click on where I see the comments. Hey, can you slip out the pilots? Yeah, that's probably a really good idea. It should really be in there. And what's this about a dog? Should we use the shot of the dog? I'm going to reply to that and say yes. I think the dog should stay, because if we edited the dog out, then we edit the hand waving out. So there's just one thing for me to do, and that is basically go in and change that edit of the drone. So let's have a look at what's going on here. So yeah, I can see that at the start of this, there is the guy in shot. I can probably just move this a little bit, so then in points and the out points are good. So let's just take it over here and play that back. Still in slightly. Let's remove them a bit more. I think that will probably get him out. Yeah, so I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to go back to the Iconik panel. I'm going to just tick on the checkbox to say that I've done it. And I'm going to save the project. I'm going to go back to my project tab, upload the new version because I've made some changes. So he'll probably want that if he's going to download the project file. And I'm going to upload a new render. So I've actually renamed it in the sequence, but it's still associated to the same clip as before. So this means that you could have multiple sequence names and so forth, but they're associated to the correct one. But it's going to upload it as a new version. So that will then render with Adobe Media Encoder back up, and it will then reset the approval on the asset. So once it's finally uploaded, this rejected will go and change status. So I'm going to switch back and let Mike take over.
Cool. So, and yet again, we will share my screen out here and share my desktop. And here we are on the same asset that we were working with a little bit before. And we can see that the process of upload is still happening on Tim's end. Actually, I can even see that in our jobs. So we can see that there's a transcode request going on for this. And obviously, we're flipping some video back and forth, so some of these things take a second. But if I hop back to that item, you'll notice that it says, okay, version 2 is in place now for this item. And now the proxy for version 2 is getting generated. And as soon as that pops up, I'll be able to start making comments on it and take a quick look at it. So let's see where we're at. So the transcode is in process right now. And this is a pretty short clip, so shouldn't take more than a few seconds. There we go. So now I can take a look at this clip, watch it from the beginning. Well, let's watch it from the actual beginning because Tim has put time into this. So I don't want to disrespect his efforts. And there we go, our cut's good on that we asked for. Dog's still in the shot, so we're happy there. So I can look at that and say, hey, that's good. So I'll simply set that to approved. And now that that's approved, something interesting can happen here. So we have this capability of building relationships automatically. And because Tim used the panel to actually export this, we know which project that's an output of. And I can simply go to that project and I can now download that project here back in Detroit. So I just simply download the project, there it is, and I can open up that project. And you'll see that I have all the media is missing. I can say offline all, and you'll notice that this is the cut that Tim did. And yes, there's a lot of red boxes right now, but we're gonna fix that. So what I'm able to do is inside of Iconik in my Premiere, I can open up the project and I can simply say reconnect original files for all proxies. And what that's going to do is go to the original high-res 4K ProRes files, that's 60 gigs worth of video, and it's going to link it all back up in my timeline. And now I'm linked to the original high-res. Now you will notice that the logo here is gone and that there's no music when I hit play. That's because Tim created those assets remotely. He uploaded them into the cloud. So I need to grab those as well. So I can simply say resolve missing originals because those aren't on premise with me right now. They're not accessible to Premiere. But I can just click that button and it's going to go download those two files really quickly, swap them out inside of Premiere, and now I have music and I have a transparent logo that was added in by Tim. So now I'm working, if we take a look at all of this content and look at the properties, we can see that this is a 25 gigabyte file that is on my local storage gateway on my laptop, linked back to the originals. And I can really simply actually take this and export it right out of Premiere. I can say, hey, I'm going to make this actually a ProRes HQ file, and I'm going to put it into my storage gateway. So we'll go to my storage gateway, our webinar content. We'll make a new folder here called Masters, and I will call this Drone Edit Master. Save it there, and go ahead and hit export. And now my laptop's going to start grinding away at exporting that with the full original high res. So this is all going to be ProRes HQ, no proxies involved whatsoever here, all original for the uncompressed for the audio. This, you know, it's a 35-ish second edit, right, that we did. So this is going to take about 35 seconds on my laptop to do. Right? If you have a faster machine, it'll go even faster. And what's going to happen is, because I exported that right back into the storage gateway itself, the storage gateway is going to pick up that object and start generating a proxy for it. So you'll probably notice here in a few seconds that my processor load on my laptop is going to jump from not a whole heck of a lot to quite a bit when the storage gateway picks up that item and starts generating the low-res proxy of it. And what's also going to happen, I'll show you guys in the file system really quickly, that there is not really a whole lot of smoke and mirrors there. If I go to that folder and take a look at that file, where did it go? I thought that's where I saved it.
In the directory above Drone Edit Master.
Oh, I put put it in the wrong folder. Nope, that's not it. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I put it in the wrong place. So sorry about that. Here's the original high res. And if I take a look at that, we can see that that's a ProRes HQ clip. It's a UHD clip. The actual output's 3.5 gigs. No problem there. And our storage gateway is picking that up and working on it currently. And if I hop back to Iconik itself and take a look, we'll see our drone edit master. So that's the output that I just did. There's our proxy for it. It's all complete, all good there. And what I'm actually going to do at this point is, because we have revision control, I exported over here. I'm actually going to associate it as a new version of the entire edit process we were doing. So I'm going to select an asset. I'm going to select that drone edit master. I'm going to copy all the metadata values over. And what I've just done is converted that new asset into a new revision for this particular asset. And when we take a look now, we'll see that the drone edit has 3 versions of it. The review and approve process restarted. I'm just going to go ahead and approve that because I know I did the master output. And now our existing high res was conformed back here in Detroit. Tim did the full edit over in Stockholm, added a few pieces of media to it, and we just ripped through that entire process in a little under a half an hour while explaining it to you guys. So that's kind of a high level on our remote edit workflow. I'm going to talk real quickly about the storage gateway again. We do have a handful of storage partners that actually support running the storage gateway directly on their storage, which means you do not need to run a third-party or an external computer to connect to them. Some of you guys may have found out about this webinar from them, so we just want to say thanks to the partners that have taken the effort to implement this and support it on their storage. Any storage is usable, obviously, but these guys have gone kind of above and beyond to add that functionality. So with that, I think we're going to move to a little bit of Q&A. So let me stop the screen share here, and we can take a look at some of the questions that have come in. So first, I'll answer a few of the questions that came in. I typed them into the chat, but if people aren't watching the chat, I figure I can respond to them here as well. First question from Rob Harris was, are you stuck with Premiere? Currently, we only have a plugin for Premiere. We are in active development of a plugin for Final Cut X that will be shipping later on this year. We've got it in alpha right now, but it's not ready for prime time. Is there a way to easily identify which assets in a folder live on your computer versus which are being stored remotely? I'll share my screen out again real quickly to show this. So when you are doing searches within the system, we have what we call filters, and there is a stored in filter, which shows all the storages you have rights to. So if I want to see everything that's on my storage gateway laptop, I can just filter for that really quickly and then continue to do searches from there. So I can say, find me everything that has the words webinar tag that also lives only on my laptop. So that hopefully answers that question. Is there a cost for the Premiere plugin? No, there is not a cost for the Premiere plugin. Our pricing is actually all available on our website. If you go to Iconik.io and look at plans, you can actually bring up our cost calculators. And any standard user or power user can use the Premiere plugin. So there's no additional cost outside of the functionality you get as that user within the system. Let's see, we got a few more questions coming in here. Does versioning apply to the project file itself? The answer is yes. So if we hop back and look at the project file that Tim checked in there during that process, you can see it's on version 2. And if I wanted to go back to the previous version of it, I can see when that was checked in. So at 119, he checked in the initial version, and at 126, he checked in the second version. And we can always promote or delete versions too over time. So if we've finished a project and we don't need versions, that's fine. Or if you find that you want to go back to a fork in the road, you can do that as well. So, and there's a clean up old versions, which will actually cleanse all the old versions that aren't set to latest if you have a very large revision chain.
It's also worth noting that it works with Adobe team projects as well. I mean, then you wouldn't be checking in the Premiere project into Iconik. Team projects would deal with all the project file itself, and you can let Iconik deal with all the media.
All right, so we have a question from Dylan here. What about the frame size differences between proxy and high-res files in the Premiere sequence? Do you want to take that one, Tim?
Yeah, sure. So if I just share my screen again, I mean, what we've done here is I've set the Premiere preferences up to scale and so forth. So if I go into here, you can see the default media scaling is set scale to frame size. So that would always, when I drag in these proxies, which are quite low resolution, onto my timeline, which is set at 4K, it just scales them up. But when Mike goes and reconnects all those originals, then they're 4K already, so they don't need to be scaled at all, and it all works. You can do it individually on the clip as well, scale to frame size and so forth, and take it off. So that would then change it, but scale to frame size really helps for this.
So Seth commented, wonderful. So thanks, Seth. I'll just, that was in our question feed. From Tom, is there a look to add a Finder-based plugin similar to Google Drive Stream? So functionally, that is what the storage gateway does. If I share out mine again here, you'll notice that within my file system here for the storage gateway, that is actually the same exact directory structure that we are watching. I've got Mike's laptop over here. And if we go into the folder I'm looking at and pull my Finder up again here, you'll notice that these are the exact same items in the exact same trees, and we can watch that path if we want. And I can even make modifications in the file system. So earlier on, I put that drone edit master in the wrong place. That's okay. I can just drag it into that masters folder like I want to. And our storage gateway is actually going to pick up that change, and it's going to actually checksum that object to make sure it is indeed the same file that we thought it was, and it's going to relink to it. So if we go take a look at that asset, which is the most recent asset here, and we take a look at our formats, we're going to see that the high res went missing, right? So Iconik's aware that I've moved that file, but on its next cycle, once it's done checksumming that file, it's actually going to update itself, and it's going to say, hey, there it is, and it's actually in this new folder. So you can still have complete usability of your Finder and file system without breaking Iconik functionally. It's monitoring the changes, but it's also monitoring your file movements, checksums, those sorts of things. So mark that as answered. Okay. How do you John asks, how do you manage Adobe Premiere updates? Do you recommend we remain on the existing version until you confirm compatibility? Universally, I think that's a pretty safe thing to say yes to. That said, we actually use Adobe's Exchange platform to deliver that plugin, and our plugin is version aware, so it will automatically install the appropriate version for the version of Premiere you have. Now, if you update your Premiere before we have confirmed a release, to be fair, sometimes it does actually work pretty well. And then for the last few releases, we haven't had to do a whole heck of a lot. Sometimes Adobe releases breaking fixes. So our general recommendation is to not update Premiere until you've confirmed on the Exchange panel that we support the version you want to move to. Anything to add there, Tim?
Well, luckily, I mean, Adobe lets you install older versions side by side quite often. So it's only the big jumps, like from 2019 to 2020, where they do introduce some of these problems. So, and you can install both of those side by side nowadays. So if you find that there's a problem, you can always just jump back and use the panel. And we generally release very quickly after they've done an update as well.
Great. Lon has a question. While those storage solutions you listed support the storage gateway, are there advantages to running the storage gateway on an actual computer? I would say the advantages are that you get to scale that computer to the size of your storage and your profile. So obviously, when you run it on storage, you have a benefit of a single solution. But when you run it on storage, you have the downside of not being able to independently scale the amount of horsepower the storage gateway might have. So if you have a very, very large data set that is in a very large amount of churn, the storage gateway is going to be doing more work than it would be in a relatively static data set. And you might need more transcode power or more read speed or something along those lines. So it's a balance. The benefit of running it on storage is one less computer to buy, one less cost center to deal with. The benefit of running it independently is you have full absolute control over what the heck the storage gateway does. Jeffrey asks, can this be used in After Effects? Short answer is yes, it can be used in After Effects. The After Effects plugin, however, does not support the proxy workflow. Adobe doesn't really give us access to do that, but the more we talk to designers that are using After Effects, working with low resolution in After Effects probably doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense because comping on a proxy is probably less desirable than you might want. So I'm waiting for After Effects to launch here, which is a little slower than Premiere.
There's also some difference in the feature set. We try and keep parity between the applications, but there are differences in the API. It's obviously a different application as well, so it has different paradigms around, you know, comps versus sequences and so forth. So we try and maintain as much as possible.
Yeah, so you can see up here, we have an Iconik extension right inside of After Effects. I can sign into Iconik really quickly. Hop back into After Effects, and there's our drone edit that I just worked on, and that is local to me, so I can say open that to edit in After Effects, and there it is available in my comp immediately. Though having Premiere, AME, After Effects, and a Zoom meeting going on a laptop at the same time is definitely not making my Mac happy. So I'm going to hurry up and stop the share and quit After Effects really quickly. And I think it's worth mentioning there as well that we have support for Photoshop, Illustrator, and Audition as well as After Effects and Premiere. So it's not just the After Effects and Premiere. Let's see, from Sebastian, any Avid integration plans, sort of a Media Central interplay alternative? We'd love to if Avid ever opens up their SDK for Media Composer, but they don't make that available to partners. So until that day comes, we don't have any options. And we've decided a long time ago we're not going to reverse engineer somebody else's technology. So Unfortunately, the Avid functionality is somewhat limited given what they allow us to do. From Jason, in the Premiere Pro extension, can you download entire sub collections? So Tim, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Yes, you can definitely open entire collections. So if I just share my screen again and move the QA panel, go to search. I've obviously got the collection here. I do have the ability to open the assets in a collection. So I can also do that from the search interface as well. What it doesn't do is go into collections that are in collections. These can be really, really deep. Obviously, when somebody's mapped their entire file system, it could be very large. So these are collections as well. So this doesn't operate recursively. I can only open the immediate assets, which are none in there. So, well, just that image actually. So that's one of the limitations, but that's really on purpose because otherwise it's just going to open everything on his laptop that he's pointed the ISG to.
Yeah, there's definitely a risk that somebody could right-click the top level of an entire project structure and bring in 100,000 assets into Premiere and, you know, cause some havoc. All right. From Ward, if you're moving an existing SAN with tons of legacy projects and source footage over to an Iconik storage gateway, do we need to add all of the search metadata manually, or will existing info get cataloged? So there's a few different ways that we associate metadata. And you may have missed this because I did hit this pretty quick earlier, but I'll share my screen again so that you guys can see this. When we bring items into Iconik via a storage gateway through the file system, like our drone edit here. Actually, we made that one as a version, so I told it not to do that. But you can see that in this case, it actually tagged it with the entire folder structure that that item was brought in from. So if you have a rich folder structure already, we'll automatically tag all of that as searchable terms with storage gateway when it starts to scan. And then if you also have embedded metadata, IPTC, EXIF, XMP metadata, we do have the ability within the system to inherit those fields. So any XMP, EXIF, or IPTC field that's ever been seen by the system is then inheritable and can be mapped to a specific field type. So you'll notice on some of these, I've got some metadata here, and I've got a technical field. And that technical data field is scraped all from IPTC metadata and media info metadata that you know, I didn't have to put any of that stuff in, it just mapped directly. And if you have custom fields, you can do that as well. So there's multiple different ways of accomplishing that. Let's see, John has another question. If rushes are filmed on location, can these be uploaded to Iconik as a full res and then also be put into the SAN back at base? Yes. So there's a couple of different ways you can do that. One is the way Tim did it. He just went to the upload window right within Iconik and dragged those items onto it, or choose whatever files you may want to upload. And you can upload them directly through the web UI. Or if your DIT machine has the storage gateway running, maybe on a large storage array or something along those lines, we support the option of on any storage gateway to upload original files as well. And then you can select any cloud bucket you'd like, and those original files will be replicated automatically to that cloud bucket as soon as they're added. So think of it kind of Dropbox-esque in that side of things. We're not going to automatically transfer those back down to the SAN on-prem, but you can do a bulk transfer. So I could say, hey, I want, you know, all of these items here to transfer someplace. I could just right-click them all, hit a transfer, and then transfer them to any storage that the system can see. So I could send this to my home office NAS, or across town to my work office where nobody's working right now, or what have you, via the storage gateways. And we can theoretically automate that process as well. We have these things called webhooks that allow you to subscribe to different things happening, and you could build complex structures with our API. So hopefully that answers that question. All right. Dustin has a question. When you have a version review in the Premiere panel with comments from the collaborator, is it possible to sync that panel version with the sequence so you can easily see and click on the comments you have in the playhead? and correct place in the sequence. So the way actually, Tim, do you want to show this because you've still got the panel up?
Well, what Mike is going to show is basically adding the clip in that was rendered. So you could go in and bring in this drone edit down and then you would see it. But I think what you're really after is that I would go into drone edits, and scrubbing here would also change the timeline here. And basically that is kind of on the to-do list. The first part of that was making sure that we had the list of sequences in here. So you could go into the sequence object and we track the sequence with the Iconik assets. So the first part of that work has been done. But the next part is really to do that ganged playback. So it's on the to-do list. It's one of those really nice features, I think, that will add to it, definitely. So coming soon, I hope.
So Rybar asked, hey, thanks, Mike. Are you guys at all interested in working with Resolve to get an extension going? Short answer again is yes. Last we checked, though, that SDK still wasn't publicly available. Maybe we should check again. So I don't think there's any lack of desire for us to tie into as many third-party products as possible. The biggest issue there is availability of SDKs and time. It does take time to build these complex integrations. So what we always tell our partners and our customers is you're always welcome to open feature requests with us. We track all of that internally. We keep logs on all of it. And if we have a very high influx of customers asking for something specific and it is technically possible, it gets prioritized. So, you know, squeaky wheel gets the grease from our paying customers. All right, we got one from Dylan here. So changes to motion properties are not supported when relinking high res. Yes, they actually are. So if this, I think this is in relationship to our scale question earlier with the proxies. This is, I'll share my screen out again here because this is more of an Adobe thing than an Iconik thing, but I think it's worth going over because the nomenclature is quite odd. When you have an item set to scale to frame size, it actually doesn't manipulate the scale of the object. It just makes it the size. If you do set to frame size, it actually manipulates the scale property. So it's really named poorly in Adobe's world. But if I go take a look at this item here and actually look at the effect controls, you can see within motion, scale is still at 100%. And on Tim's with the proxies, it's the exact same. So if you start to do complex animations and those sorts of things, it's still going to work fine. That's not a problem. And that's why when we really linked all this stuff up, actually, Tim, if you want to show your screen really quickly and disable that scale the frame size on a clip so you can see what it looks like when you don't have that set. Because he's still got the proxies over there.
So let's take it off here. QA window open. So that's what it looks like without.
So your object properties don't get modified. That set scale to frame size option essentially allows you to scale up your lower res proxies without actually modifying any of the effects controls. All right, so let's see. Joel asks, what's the best way to limit client and or editor access to only specific projects? Great question. We fully support ACLs and roles management within the system. So if you take a look here, any item in the system, I can go in and I can actually, whether it be a project or an item, I can modify access controls. And Tim was the one that actually created this one, but everyone has access to it. I could very quickly just remove that permission, but I could also say, hey, my London team does need access to that and they need read and write access to it. So I can hit add and modify the permissions. And permissions rights management is controlled by what we call roles in the system. So depending on who you are and what you're logged in as defines what you can actually see and do. So if I log out really quickly and I log back in as a different user, this is the exact same domain, but you'll notice that there's a whole heck of a lot less information in there. And there's less clips. You can only see the ones that Tim added because of the way his group membership works, and the upload button's gone, and you know your logo changes and all sorts of stuff. So you have full customization on who can do what in the system at a really, really granular level. All right, so let's see. An anonymous attendee says, how do we get a sweet Iconik hoodie? Well, hey man, buy some Iconik and send us a feature request for something cool and maybe we'll send you one. See, David asks, if Mike wanted to send his high-res footage to the cloud so it doesn't only exist on his laptop, what does that delivery step look like? It's pretty easy. I could just highlight those items. So I could just say, hey, let's search for webinar and let's look for only the things that are on Mike's laptop. That brings up those clips. I select all of them. I right click, I hit transfer, and then I could send that to whatever storage I wanted to. So I could say upload to Backblaze. Not gonna do that because I don't want to throw 60 gigabytes in the middle of a webinar at an upload, but it's very simple to transfer things around. And you can transfer from storage gateway to storage gateway as well. So if I wanted to send this 60 gigs over to my office, we are going to go through the cloud to do that. So we will upload it temporarily to cloud storage and then download it to that location and then purge it from cloud storage. But that means that you can transfer things from site to site as well. All right. Kadi asks, what is the required hardware to run Gateway? That is going to be any Mac, Windows, or Linux machine. I think we support back to High Sierra for Mac right now, CentOS 6 or 7 for Linux, Ubuntu 16 or 18 LTS on that side, and then Windows, what's our Windows back limit, 10? Or go back to 7, I can't remember, or 8. And then we recommend 4 cores per simultaneous transcode. So you can set how many simultaneous transcodes you want the system to actually be doing. The more, the better. Obviously, the faster it can rip through things. But that's about it. So yeah, and this is all available in our documentation. So if you go to help and you literally just type in ISG, it walks through all the instructions for setting that up on all of the various different platforms. So yeah, it's 10.13 or higher, Windows 10, Server 2012 or Server 2016, and then CentOS 6, 7, Ubuntu 16 and 18. All right, Tom says, perfect. Jason said, I noticed you download the project to conform outside of Premiere before opening it. Is it not possible to open the project you want to conform from the panel? And can you explain why this is the recommended process? Yeah, because Premiere doesn't allow you to open projects from within a project without embedding the project inside a project. So if I close the project right now, this is a Premiere issue really, I can't open an extension because there's no project open. So I can't open Iconik inside of Premiere to open the project to embed. So if Adobe, now if funnily enough, this isn't an issue in Photoshop or After Effects. You can actually not have a comp open or not have an item open in those apps, and you can send stuff in. So it's just an idiosyncrasy of Premiere and the way it works with anybody's plugin. Obviously, you can see the entire extensions thing is grayed out, so this wouldn't be any different for anybody else. Let's see, does it matter if one user is on a Mac versus one on a PC? Nope, doesn't matter. And Jason just slacked me personally and said, but you can have more than one project open at the same time. Yes, there are, but you cannot import from a panel into a project that is not an active project. So there's some gotchas, and maybe Tim, you want to talk to the discussions you've had with Adobe around that, because I know that we want that to be a possibility. It just isn't right now.
Yeah. And just to answer the Mac PC question, we actually translate the paths. So when you move the project file and it ends up on another operating system, we've got that, okay, it's missing files again, but then we translate them and work out where the media should live and open it.
So Lon asks, does the storage gateway take advantage of the computer's GPU? So currently it does not. It's CPU only rendering. We are starting to play with GPU rendering for the storage gateway. Right now, it's only going to support NVIDIA cards, so AMD is going to be left out in the cold, even if we do get that working, and it's still experimental, so we're not sure. That said, we do have support within the system for external transcoders from third parties. So when we're looking in the system, we can actually set up local transcoders from both Vantage from Telestream and then Elemental Server from AWS. So if you want to use something that does support GPU encoding, and you already have one of those on-prem to do your proxy generation, you can have it offloaded to a secondary server. And in those cases, your ISG can actually be a remarkably lightweight machine because it's not actually doing much compute. It's just doing indexing at that point. All right. Dan at Gray Meta asks, can you do a quick run through on the ingest metadata options? Yeah, so when you're uploading something, you can actually, this is actually, there's a variety of different ways of doing this, but with the upload form, I can actually require metadata fields and views so that people are required to actually put in various metadata. So I drag that file in, and if I just hit update, it's actually not gonna let me because I haven't set a required field yet. And you'll also notice that my upload button actually won't work until I set metadata. So if I just clicked upload right now, I'm not gonna, because again, this is a 400 meg or 300 meg file, but that's not gonna prompt me. Now, if you're just dragging things into the storage gateway, you don't really have any manual metadata entry options because it's being brought in from a folder, but we do support sidecar metadata. So if you have a third-party system delivering to it, you can actually deliver that via JSON, CSV, or XML. In our format, and we'll automatically map metadata. So from external delivery, that's one way of doing it. And then we also have a completely open API for manipulating all of this stuff. So if you want, you can register literally everything via the API. And the API is interactive. It's available for all of our customers. You can just log in and go to town on manipulating stuff that way.
And we can work with some embedded metadata, so XMP, XIF, that kind of things.
Yeah, and I mentioned that a little. I think I demonstrated that about 5 minutes ago. So we have the ability to embed any embedded metadata from XIF, IPTC, or XMP. We actually can import at that point. Carl asks, we're used to manually creating proxies after a shoot. Would Iconik be a good replacement for a media encoder in terms of creating proxies for, let's say, an entire day's worth of shooting? The storage gateway is going to generate those proxies automatically when you drag things onto it, but it is going to need to be able to see Iconik for that process to happen as far as the web UI goes. So we do have some customers that you can even use a 3G modem or something, or 4G modem in this case, because we're sending 3 megabit proxies. It tends to not be too heavy. So it absolutely could be. And we've also had some customers using, third-party rush software, things like Kino, to decardify content and dump it into an ISG. ISG starts generating proxies, but keeps the high res, on the DIT station, so that you have some degree of field logging and some degree of metadata input into, when you're logging in the field. You can even have something like Kino running on a laptop, not connected to the internet whatsoever, and tagging all that stuff. And then when you drag it into the ISG, that stuff comes along for the ride. So a couple of different workflows we've seen customers do in that environment. Let's see. Carlos asks about Resolve integration. We spoke about that a little earlier. We're waiting on an SDK that's viable for us to do a panel for that, but as soon as one's available, we'll happily take a look at it. See, Sebastian asks, could proxies be other format like ProRes proxies so you can keep metadata of camera lens or audio metadata from other softwares? So if that metadata actually comes in as XMP metadata, we're still going to track all that stuff in the object, even if the high-res object doesn't get checked into Iconik. But I don't know if we send that into Premiere if you're opening just the proxy. So we do support a concept of what we call a Premiere Pro proxy. This is kind of a hidden feature, but Premiere proxies are not, they call them edit proxies, not proxies in the term of our web delivery. We have to use a certain specific format to maintain frame accuracy in our player in the web UI. So you can't really modify too much our proxies, but we can generate secondary proxies and register them into the system as edit proxies. And we have customers doing that with ProRes proxy or ProRes LT or something along those lines. It's a little more of an advanced workflow, but it is doable. Let's see. Peter asks, will this webinar available as a recording afterwards? Yep, absolutely. Just feel free to shoot us. We're going to publish it on our socials, but if you'd like just to get a direct link to, just send us a comment through the webpage and we'll happily get it to you. There's a little contact us button in the corner of our webpage. Let's see. Anonymous asks, I think you're able to share files from Cantamo to Iconic, but I think from Iconic to Cantamo was on the roadmap. You're talking about the Cantamo portal to Iconic sync functionality. Currently, yeah, it's one-way synchronization from portal up to Iconic. The reverse would be doable at some point, but we just frankly have other higher priority features right now. So originally, I believe we slated that around Q4 of this year. I'm not sure if that's changed at all. So, you know, we can talk about that a little bit more offline if you're an existing portal customer that you'd like to dive deeper on that. Let's see. Lauren asks, once full res are uploaded from location, do proxies get created via Iconic? Yes. So if you are directly delivering to cloud storage via either our uploader or right into a cloud bucket, we'll generate the proxies in the cloud. So the storage gateway can generate them automatically on premise or on a laptop or what have you, and anything that gets added to a cloud bucket can get generated automatically in the cloud. So you got a lot of questions, guys. I'm loving this. Jason asks, will you be sharing the screen recording? Yep, talked about that one a little bit already. We definitely will. Is it possible to replace a footage file? Oh, Margot, I'm sorry, asks, is it possible to replace a footage file stored on Iconic with a newer version, or would it be uploaded as a new unique file? Yes, it is actually possible to revision. So we essentially, when we set up a storage gateway itself, there is an option for asset suffix versions. The default is _v and then a number, but you could say _r and a number, for example, if you wanted to. And if you had movie.mov and then you put movie __r2, it will revision that to another version. So it is possible to do revisions in place without actually having to do the upload. And then your other option is completely doing that manually. So you can name it whatever the heck you want, throw it into a storage gateway. And when you go into the UI, you can just link assets as versions at that point as well. Which I don't know if I was sharing my screen for that whole entire demo. So I just said that all out loud and you were just looking at me looking at my laptop. So Raybar asks again, he's gonna check in with the Resolve team. Great. See, Lewis asked, how easy would it be to upload a project using media not originally uploaded to Iconic, but uploaded after? Can you relink the same media when that media is imported in Iconic? So we are working on I believe, if I'm reading this properly, the goal is to have an existing project that happens before Iconic, be able to kind of link to media that's added to Iconic at a later date. We're working on a script for this that people can run to kind of conform older projects to link to items. So it will be possible. It is not exactly the cleanest solution in the world because frankly, there's a lot of magic we're doing behind the scenes with the Adobe APIs to be able to do some of the fun stuff that we're able to do here. But feel free to contact us offline. We can work you through that and make sure that I'm actually reading that properly. Let's see. Carl asks, when Tim added and uploaded the song and the graphic file, where do they exist now on the main storage? I.e., if you have an editor adding graphics and sound effects when they upload them, how do you make sure it's all appropriately filed to your main SAN? So you can do a batch transfer if you want to, and it'll ignore the items that are already transferred to that location. So if let me share my screen again here with Zoom so you guys can see this. Share. So if we go back into our little project collection here, which is actually all of our content from, whoops, was it that one or that one or that one? I have too many in here. This one, which has Tim's content in it and my content in it. If I right click here and I say, I want to transfer that, and I can choose Mike's laptop, and I can actually put it in a new path. So I'm gonna do, webinar. I think I called it webinar content. Yeah, webinar content. And hit transfer. Now, a lot of that content's already been transferred, so it's just going to skip it all. It's not going to download it, but it will transfer the audio file and the image file into that path for me behind the scenes. And when those transfers are complete, you can see it lives in 2 places. So it's already done, actually. It finished it because those were pretty small files. And if I go back into my file system there, you'll notice, hey, there's the ambient short audio wave file, and there's the alpha movie. So, and you can see they were modified at 210, which was 10 seconds ago.
So when I uploaded it, it went straight to the cloud. But if you wanted that automated, I mean, depending on your environment, there are ways of doing it, making sure that everything that goes into the cloud also goes to your main SAN if you really wanted that. So it just depends on your environment, what we would suggest and how to do that.
Okay. Jayakumar asks, if we have current projects that have originated outside of Iconik or before, how do we relink them once they get all the files into the ISG? So that's the script we're actively working on right now. We hope to have at least a beta that some of our customers can test sometime by next week-ish, maybe late next week. And then we're going to actually put that through some tests on some production environments and then hopefully release it. I think our long-term goal is to have that actually be a functionality within the product, not just an external script. But given that there's been so much work from home lately, there's a high desire to have that quickly. So we're going to kind of try to do a Band-Aid for our customers and try to do it as quickly as possible. And then, do you have freehand annotation for review? I'm not quite sure what you mean by freehand annotation.
I presume it's like drawing.
Oh, yeah, so draw, yeah, if you mean draw on support for annotation, we do not have that yet. That is targeted for a roadmap in Q3 right now, Tim?
Q2.
Q2, okay. Yeah, you shouldn't have said that out loud. No, now you got to do it.
It's going to drop in Q3.
Rob asks, what's the typical bitrate for proxies? So they are 720p proxies with a 3 megabit target bitrate. With the ISG, you do have a hidden feature that you can change that. So if you want to make them 1080 or if you want to make them a higher or lower data rate, you can do that. But the cloud transcoder will always make them 720p and that's original frame rate, and that is frame accurate for the player. So yeah, that's how the proxies work. You can modify it a little bit on your site for those. You can't really modify the cloud one without using an external cloud transcoder. It is worth mentioning that we do support external cloud transcoders as well for proxies. So we support AWS Media Convert, Vantage Cloud, Zencoder, and encoding.com, I believe. I think that's the third-party ones we support right now. All right, Dan says, great. You're welcome, Dan. Anonymous asks, we ingest footage from a camera card to our SAN through Finder on the Mac. With Iconik, should we ingest directly from the camera card into Iconik? You could do something like that. I mean, the biggest thing that I always kind of mention here is that you probably want to decardify that content before you bring it in, because there's more often than not a lot of information that's not really needed to accomplish that. And, you know, tools like Kino do a great job of that, right? So I can take Kino and I can fire that up and I can actually go browse my external drive here, which has got some camera cards on it, right? So inside here, video, camera, Panasonic, and actually, here we go, some red footage, right? And if I wanted to take that, I could actually use this to or I could even do my drill down here and just look at all of my stuff and select which ones I wanted to move over. And I could actually convert those as a rewrap or convert them into a mezzanine format and dump them directly into a folder that Iconik's watching. So I could say, hey, I want to grab those 2 particular files. I'm going to convert them to DNX HR UHD, and I'm going to put them into my work in progress XDCAM HD folder here and hit go. And now Kino is going to do the job of kind of decardifying that right off the external storage and moving it right onto my storage gateway and putting it into a much more logical format. And there are other tools that can do this as well. I just mentioned this one because I use it a lot and it works really well for that sort of stuff. Let's see. So we answered that guy. Lon asks, can the ISG add a time code stamp? Not currently. I assume, Lon, you're meaning burn in. Not currently, but we were planning on adding that in the future. I don't know how soon that'll make its way in. We may actually be able to do that with a hidden flag though right now in the config file, because there are some things we can do in the hidden with the ISG with hidden flags. So Johan asks, please send the recording to me. Okay, we will. Lewis says, thank you. Is there an additional cost per ISG, Anonymous? No, there is not. So you can have as many ISGs as you want running in as many different locations as you want, and no additional cost. The ISG runs as a user. So if you wanted different permissions, you'd probably have to have a user per ISG. So I guess there's an inherent cost there. But most of our customers, they just have whoever their group admin is as the ISG user, and that person's using the system anyway. So we got just a few more questions left here, and we ran a little bit long, so I really appreciate you guys sticking around to ask all these. Adam asks, can Adobe Rushes work with this easily? Tim, have you tested Adobe Rushes yet?
I haven't, so I would have to say no, it doesn't.
Yeah, maybe, but we don't know.
Yeah,
so
maybe.
We'll take that on ours to give it a try and see what we can come up with. Let's see, can you Peter asks, can you backtrack which assets that have been used where? Yes, so let me share my screen again here really quickly. So if we go to our actual drone edit here, and we take a look at the related items, we can see the project itself that created it. And if I go to the project file, I can actually see all of the media that was used in that project file. So you can see that project file uses all of this media. And you can go to any one of those clips and see all the projects that used it as well. So you have bidirectional. You do have to use the panel to add those pieces of content in for this all to work. But if you do, it works great. All right. Lon says, thanks. You're welcome, Lon. Jayakumar asks, can you share with someone without an Iconik login? Also, can it watermark? So watermarking, you'd have to use an external transcoder right now to do, but if you use an external transcoder, that is supported. And I forgot that I was rendering all this red stuff. Look at that. It's going to town generating the proxies from that stuff I just dumped out. If you want to share with somebody externally, you can do that. So you can hit share and you can put in anybody at any domain. So anyone at anywhere.com. And then you can share those assets. And you have the ability to limit what they can actually do too. So if you just wanted to be able to view it and not download, you can take those rights away. And there's a variety of different permissions. And then you can password encode those as well if you want, or put your own password in there if you want. So they'll need both their unique URL as well as the password to get access to that. We can also build share links now. So if I go into share, you can see there's a generate a shareable link, and that shareable link doesn't actually have a user. I can just copy that link and then send that to anybody at that point. So that doesn't have authentication associated with it, obviously, other than a password if you choose to put a password on that shareable link, but that works as well. All right. Ben says, great demo, Mike and Tim. Thanks. Thanks, Ben.
No problem.
And then Sebastian asks, is there a mobile app for directors to view the proxies? Actually, you don't have to use an app. It is a full HTML5 web app. So I'm going to pull out my little iPhone here, and I'm going to click on Iconik and log in real quick. Where's my thumb ID? Come on. If I can figure out how to actually log in on my phone. It's astonishing how often I get used to Face ID now that when I actually have to log into something, I don't know what I'm doing. Log in. And now I can go, this is very hard to do. I'm sure this is exceptionally effective, but there's the edit that Tim did playing on my phone right now. So yeah, we don't really need one. And last, Jai Kumar says, cool, thanks. And Sebastian said, cool, thanks. So I think we've now run 20 minutes over. Oh, we got another one from Dan. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Dan. I think we've got all the questions answered. If you guys have anything further, you guys are more than welcome to hit us up directly. You know, if you want to kick the tires a little bit, we can get you a domain up and running. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.